Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com here with a build for the Magic Dragonknight, one of the top classes and characters you're going to pick up in the Elder Scrolls Online Deadlands Update 32. In this video, I'm going to go over what I found, how I use it, the skills, the gear, champion points, and more. You're going to want to watch this video to see what's changed with the Magic Dragonknight in PvP. Use this as a template and make it your own. Thanks for watching. So what has changed with the Dragonknight? We're going to go to the patch notes, and that's for Update 32 Deadlands. What I consider one of the strongest, most recent changes is the Ardent Flame Combustion passive. Increase the resource granted from this passive to 500 and 1000 stamina or magicka, up from 250 to 500. So now the Combustion passive reads like this. Increase the damage of your burning and poison status effect by 50%. When you apply the burning to an enemy, you restore 1000 magicka. When you apply poison to an enemy, you restore 1000 stamina. These effects can occur once every half second individually from each other. Too Long Didn't Read version of this, the burning status effect you have within your class kit using burning embers, and that's one of your main damage over time effects, which will feed into your sustain loop. That burning status effect is going to add a damage over time of about 4 seconds, but most importantly, it's going to feed in your sustain loop. So Dragonknight in general had some issues Magic did with sustain. This is a massive step in the right direction, making it very easy to sustain as long as you're kind of built and geared towards that burning status effect and understand how it works. Next change up is a really important one to Lava Whip. There's essentially 2 different morphs of this ability, and now they're going to scale off your highest offensive stats. You're going to see Stam users use the whip even though it costs magic and it can hit very hard on a Stam build or a hybrid build. We're still going to spec into magic and Molten Whip, something that's very important for your burst combo, Seething Fury. These are stacks that you can get from using Ardent Flame abilities on your front bar with Whip equipped. So Cauterize, Burning Embers, Engulfing Flames. You can stack up to 3 to give you a lot more spell damage for a really nasty big whip, which we're going to talk about in the combo section. What they did was they changed the Seething Fury stacks to now last 10 seconds, up from 5, making it much more reliable for the average player to actually get off a 3-stack whip for a kill shot. Another thing they did was they changed the World and Ruin passive, and now this is going to increase your damage with Flame and Poison's attack by 2 and 5%, rather than increasing your damage done with area of effect flame damage and reducing the cost of your poison abilities. Essentially, this means it's going to be really nice for extra flame damage. And then last change I want to go over quickly is Battle Roar and how it works. This passive, they got to boost a little bit in resource sustain, so now it's going to give 50 health, magic, and stamina per ultimate consumed, rather than 46 health, magic, and stamina per ultimate cost. So we looked at how Ferocious Leap would work. Let's say it costs 125 ultimate. Under the old system, if you had 500 ultimate saved and you use this ultimate, you would get back 5,750 resources across the board, health, magic, and stamina. Now, if you use that 500 ultimate consumed, even though it only cost 125 ultimate, you would get back 25,000 health, magic, and stamina. So think of how this works essentially like Balorgs. You save up for a 500, you're getting a ton of resources back. There were a bunch of other changes in the patch notes, but I think those were the most significant. And the Dragonknight really has great steady damage over time effects. It's very aggressive playstyle and very durable. The cons of the build essentially are you're going to have to play in melee range, and you're going to have to know how these mechanics work, specifically the burning status effect in your combustion passive, along with Battle Roar, to really make the most out of the build. I'm going to use this a little bit differently than what you commonly see. I'm going to go kind of a retro sword and board back bar than a restoration staff. I'm going to explain why as we go through this video. And the front bar staff is going to be a fire staff. That's an obvious choice. So let's talk about that and work through the skills first, how I use them and set up the combo. The number 1 skill on my front bar is Fossilize. So this is a single target crowd control ability that cannot be blocked or avoided. This is essentially probably the best CC one-on-one in the game, because when you do stun them, if they break 3, they're going to be immobilized after. So it's a way to lock down your opponent, stun them, and then they're going to have the dodge roll to get out of it or use another ability. Now, the way you properly use this is one of 2 ways. You can use it to kind of close the gap and then dot your target up, or you can dot your target up and then hit it for a 3-stack Seething Fury whip. Next up is Burning Embers. This is a strong, low-cost damage over time ability. You can recast it for a burst heal. This is usually my initial attack on a target. One reason is it procs the burning status effect, feeding into that combustion passive I already talked about, giving us back magic. The second, it will create another 4-second dot with that burning status status effect, and you can recast it to gain more stacks of Seething Fury for a big whip. The heal is based off the damage done, so the earlier you cast it, the better. Next ability up is Cauterize. This is a great heal to you or an ally that procs every 5 seconds over 15 seconds. So essentially it's going to do 3 heals over its duration. What's nice about it is it doesn't require a target, and it builds stacks of Seething Fury, which is going to make your Molten Whip hit harder. That's why we slot it on our front bar. It's going to give us spell critical passively for having on there. It's going to heal as well, and we can build up the stacks of Seething Fury to make our Molten Whip because it doesn't have a target. So you can just sit there and spam cast it to get that 3 stacks up, and then recast it so those durations of the stack are refreshed. Then close the distance, stun, whip, boom, big damage. Next ability up is Molten Whip, which I've talked about a lot. So essentially what this is going to do, when you activate an Ardent Flame ability, you gain a stack of Seething Fury, increasing your damage of your next Molten Whip by 33% and your weapon and spell damage by 75 for 10 seconds. This can stack up to 3 times and scales off the highest offensive stat. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to cast Embers, Cauterize, and Engulfing consecutively to get that 3 stack up. And then you're going to hold it for 10 seconds. If you don't have a target, you could just recast Cauterize to refresh the duration. You do not want to spam Molten Whip as a Dragonknight. Remember, your damage over time is your primary killer. This is your kill shot. So you'll want to wait till you get the 3 stacks up, all the dots ticking on them, stun an opponent, then whip. Don't just sit there and spam it. It's not meant for that, and it's meant for a kill shot instead. Engulfing Flame's last ability on our bar, put it wherever it makes sense for you. This is a massive conal AoE damage attack that increases our flame damage on enemies. Naturally progressing for me, this is usually my second ability that I cast. So Embers first, Burning to ramp up the pressure on the dot and the flame damage. So if you cast Burning Embers and you have this up along with the Burning status effect, that's 3 dots straight out the gate and 2 global cooldowns. Next ability up is our ultimate, Ferocious Leap. This is massive burst, AoE CC and a knockback, and provides a big shield. I actually don't use this too much because I think Corrosive Armor is a much better ultimate, both defensive and offensive. We'll get to why in a little bit later, but this is a really good oh crap button and a really good bursting tool on a group or individual players. We're going to go to the back bar now, and this is Sword and Shield. So I've tried the Restoration Staff, and a lot of folks kind of play that way, and I don't blame them. I had much better luck in the way that I play, kind of the meatball up in front of everybody, using the Sword and Shield for defensive, so I can block. Everyone else is playing a DK, not just you, so you're going to get leaped all the time. This can reduce damage significantly and allow you to catch your breath and focus on what you're doing. So one of the reasons I drop Rapid Regeneration is for Draw Essence on my back bar. This ability is going to do damage to nearby enemies and healing you for 150% of the damage caused. After 2.5 seconds, it's going to exhale, doing flame damage to enemies and restoring 10% of the ability cost of each enemy hit. Essentially, it gets much more powerful the more enemies that are around. Thankfully, I get dogpiled all the time by 5-6 players. So if I hit this, I'm going to get a massive flood of healing that will outperform Rapid Regeneration, not to mention that 2.5 seconds is going to blow up. So if I go to my front bar, hit a Fossilize and a Leap right as this explodes with tons of people around me, it's a really cool combination. Consider this your flex spot. So if you want to play the Restoration Staff style, use Rapid Regeneration here, but from my testing, I've played them both extensively in the higher MMR Battlegrounds and Open World Cyrodiil. I had way better luck with Sword and Shield. Now we're going to start with the front ability, and that's Volatile Armor. This provides our armor buff AoE damage when cast, and it's useful because it gets stealthers out of stealth in a big radius. You're also going to want to keep this up, priority number 1, because of the Draconic Power passive Burning Heart. You'll have 12% increased healing received while active. So your number 1 priority is having spikes somehow out your back. You got to have this up. Next ability up is Degeneration from the Mages Guild skill line. It's a spell power buff and another hard-hitting dot. The nice thing about this is it can be cast at range, and even using Sword and Shield, when I hit someone with this, I can proc my Daedric Trickery on my back bar 5-piece, getting 1 of 5 major buffs. Next ability up is the Psijic Order skill, Race Against Time. This is a hard thing to get a hold of, but it's really useful. It's going to be your mobility tool when you're immobilized or needing a burst of speed. It also gives you Minor Force, which is quite useful for this build because we have decent critical chance rating on our front bar due to Cauterize. It's also your oh crap, get out of dodge, or you're about to charge and you want to prevent mobilization. There's one of 2 ways to play this build: Race Against Time, non-vampire, or you can go vampire with Elusive Mist. A lot of folks love the stage 3 vampire Elusive Mist combo. I do not care for it. The reason why, when I play against other Magic Dragonites, they're going to burn my face off. And when I play in Cyrodiil, there seems to be a little latency with this ability coming out of Elusive Mist. It will give you a lot of spell damage, and that's primarily the reason why people use it along with Undeath. For whatever reason, I cannot get the skill down, and it seems buggy, and I just get frustrated and drop Vamp. Either way, pick your poison here. I prefer the non-Vamp playstyle. Last ability up is our Burst Heal, Coagulating Blood. This heal is based off your missing health, meaning if you're at 75% health, I would not cast this because it's not going to do much for you. Instead, I rely on Cauterize to heal over time, and I use this for an oh crap spammable one below 50% health. Now our back bar, Corrosive Armor. This is essentially insane ultimate. What it's going to do is cap your damage for 3% of your maximum health, dealing poison damage to enemies near you for 10 seconds. While it's active, your ability and your direct damage, think Whip, Engulfing Flames, Volatile Armor, is going to ignore physical and spell resistance. So you don't necessarily need to spec into penetration with this specific build because you rely on Corrosive Armor a lot more. So now think about that 3-stack with about 5,500 or 6,000 spell damage with 100% spell penetration. It hits extremely hard without having to get 18,000 spell penetration Rock 7 light armor. This is what you're relying on. Not to mention, you become nearly invincible for a little bit of time. You can fight ball groups with this thing and not die. You can do a 1v1 and it'll be extremely hard to take down. So that's why we set the build up to generate a lot of ultimate for this specific skill. Now let's talk about the rotation, and we've already talked about a little bit of it, but pretty much you want to pre-buff. So how I do it is I start on my front bar and I use Cauterize. So that's going to build up 1 stack, but really it's going to get the healing going. So you can cast it 3 times if you want to get 3 stacks, but usually I just do it once. I flip to my back bar. From here, I use Degeneration when I close into the distance so I can get that spell power buff up. Then I hit my armor, Volatile Armor, when I'm close, so I actually hit them with the damage over time effect, then I bar swap. Now you're going to play Duck, Duck, Goose. So you already have 1 stack of Seething Fury up. Now you're going to do Burning Embers, Engulfing, and you should have 3. Remember to set up your target and hit them with a Fossilize if they're stunnable first before going into Molten Whip. If you don't know what else to do, hit a Cauterize to keep that 10-second stack of Seething Fury, or another Burning Embers on a target to proc another heal. And then Fossilize and Whip and or use a Leap to really nuke down a target. Your main priority here is to maintain your armoring generation, along with Cauterize for good healing, and rely on Coagulating Blood when you're below 50% health, and that's it. All right, now we're going to talk about the gear section. So this is the optimal gear loadout. I'm going to give you a bunch of different options to flex in and out depending on what you want. We're going to go with the Monster Helm first, and probably the best overall is Magma Incarnate. This is from Dreadcellar Veteran Dungeon. The one piece is unique. It's going to give you Magicka and stamina recovery. You need both in this build. And when you heal yourself or a group member with a single target heal ability, think Coagulating Blood, think Cauterize. You're basically going to give someone or people around you minor courage and minor resolve, increasing your spell damage by 215 and your armor by 2,974 for 10 seconds. So when playing solo or in a small group, this is incredible. Now, if someone else has this, you might want to swap to something else, but it's the best all around because it provides you with resource sustain, defensive, giving mitigation, and spell damage. The downside is that ball can actually go to someone else in the area when you hit Cauterize. So there are some flexible options. And what I play when someone else is running this, or I want to be super tanky, is triple OG Bloodspawn. It's great for ultimate generation. It doesn't have the recovery with it, but it does give you some mitigation similar to Magma Incarnate, and it's always just you. Not to mention, you're going to take a lot of damage, so this thing's going to be proccing all the time and really get your ultimate ramped up. So I use both quite frequently. A couple other options that you can use. Engine Guardian is great for selfish resource sustain and also having a decoy if you want that little droid following you. Malabeth is incredible for self-healing, giving you a massive flood of healing along with a big buff. Balorgs is great for burst damage, so if you want to go big leaps and saving up 500 and then jumping into a target and hitting a deep breath, I'd go with that. Now let's go to our front bar damage, and I tried a lot of sets, but nothing, and I mean nothing, outperformed Burning Spell Weave obtained from City of Ash 1 or 2. The 5-piece, when you deal damage with flame abilities, you apply the burning status effect to the enemy. Increase your weapon and spell damage by 490 for 8 seconds, and it can recur every 12 seconds. So it doesn't have 100% uptime, but you notice what I read, applies the burning status effect. So not only is that going to give you an extra 4-second dot, but it's going to feed into your sustain loop, and it can re-proc along with your fire enchant on your front bar, allowing you to constantly keep up, you guessed it, another damage over time effect in 1000 Magicka more reliably. I couldn't find anything that outperformed it, but here's some other options if you wanted. Kind Marcher's Cruelty is actually quite a useful debuff set and can provide some group utility, but does not outperform Burning Spellweave. Clever Alchemist, if you go on the back bar, you can get crazy burst damage, but Burning Spellweave on this loadout, really, really good. Speaking of back bar defensive sets, overall I think Daedric Trickery is the best. It's a craftable from Vardenfell. The reason why, when you deal damage, you gain 1 of 5 random buffs, major buffs for 21 seconds every 9 seconds. So you can actually stack at least 2 buffs on top of each other, and it's pretty easy to do so. The buffs are Expedition, Protection, Mending, Heroism, or Vitality. Heroism is the trick one. So that's what we're trying to go for as a Dragonknight, proccing that ultimate generation, feeding our corrosive armor and our sustain loop. Not to mention, if we get Mending or Vitality, it's going to be very, very hard to kill us. The only one where you can see some redundancy in this is Expedition, because we have Race Against Time on our bar. So that's why you're constantly going back to your back bar in this gameplay footage, is I'm trying to get more Daedric Trickery double stack procs up. I'm using volatile armor, degeneration at range, and then also my breath to get this proc as frequently as possible. There's some other defensive sets if you don't want to go this route and how I have this set up. Iron Bloods is great for duels. It's kind of a cheesy duel set where you don't necessarily need mobility in a duel, so the downsides of Iron Blood just really non-existent. But if you use this in Cyrodiil or Imperial City, you're probably going to get zerged down. Another set too that you can kind of compare with each other is Pariah. This is going to give you armor the lower your health goes, but also Buffer of the Swift is going to give you just straight up 10% damage reduction that can stack with major and minor protection. So both are good. Buffer of Swift is actually better if you look at just 10% flat damage mitigation that cannot be reduced, but it comes in light armor, or Pariah comes in heavy. Now we're going to go with the Mythic of choice. Death Dealer's Fate is what I like. The reason why is after prolonged combat of 60 seconds or more, which is very easy to get, you're going to get 2680 magic, stamina, and health across the board. So that's going to give you a lot more damage, a lot more survivability, a lot more ability to block, dodge, sprint, everything. It's just great. Now some flex options for you. Torque for great, incredible resource sustain. Wild Hunt actually is quite useful on this build, especially if you're playing Imperial City solo, because you need to get out and survive. And this new one, the Markin's Ring, gives a little bit more damage, spell damage, and a little bit of armor. This build essentially is not super set up for this, but it can give you a little bit more spell damage. You might like it. And that leaves one extra piece for the trainee gear set, and this is obtaining the starter areas, and we just use it to get a little bit more max health. Here's a sample gear chart that I have for you. Armor weights, I go with 3 heavy, 4 light, seems to be the sweet spot in resource sustain, especially in no CP. I go with reinforced heavy on the chest and impenetrable on the rest. Now you could do things like sturdy, well-fitted, whatever you want, but this is safe and simple. Glyphs, I go with prismatic in the chest, head, and legs, giving you the most max stats, magic everywhere else. So my burning spellweave staff, I actually go with Nirnhone. I've tried a bunch of different varieties and combinations. I've tried infused with oblivion damage. I've tried charge with fire damage. I've tried sharpen, but this overall gives me the best bang for my buck, especially relying on the corrosive armor. If you're not going to use corrosive armor very much, go with sharpen. That's a no-brainer. But for me, I used that and Nirnhone did the best. Now I'm going to go Daedric Trickery on my sword and shield, powered with a little spell damage enchant. I'm going to go all spell damage on the jewelry infused if you can. And so this is just my basic gear chart. Now let's switch and show you what these stats look like after 1 minute in combat. So 1 minute in combat with my Death Dealer's Fate procced, my Burning Spellweave up, I have 5,500 spell damage, and you'll notice my spell penetration isn't very high. Reason being, I'm relying on corrosive armor. Max stats are pretty big across the board. 28,000 max magic, 34k max health, and then 20,000 stamina. So I got a lot of room to block, sprint, and dodge. That's why I love the sword and board. With a tripod running, you can see I have 1,800 magic recovery, 1,000 health, and 800 stamina. Notice this will go down if you're doing Battleground since there's no champion points. And I have 30% spell clear on my front bar, which is not bad, along with 1,800 critical resistances. I have some goofy traits on here, so if you were to gold this out completely, you'd be at 2,000 or higher crit resistance, especially if it's golded. Now let's talk about the champion points and what I select, though I primarily do Battlegrounds. If I do play champion point CP, PvP, this is what I select. I go Duelist Rebuff to reduce single target damage, Ironclad to reduce direct damage, and then 2 offensive ones, Deadly Aim and Master at Arms. charm. You can swap one of those out if you'd like to increase your damage over time with thaumaturge. The reason I like this single target one is it applies to my light attack weaving as well. That adds a lot of damage, believe it or not. And then the fitness red tree. I go with bracing anchor to reduce the amount of damage that I can block, though it does reduce my movement speed, which is something that you're going to have to deal with. But when I block, I'm very durable. I'm going to go with boundless vitality for max health, fortified for a little bit more armor, and then pain's refuge. I have no way to cleanse on this DK. So if you continue to put damage over time effects on me, I get more and more tanky. The green tree really doesn't affect performance. There are some that can increase your mount speed and so forth, but this is what I go since I PvE on this character a lot. Treasure Hunter, Rationer, Liquid Efficiency, and Steed's Blessing. For attribute points, you want to find the sweet spot in your attribute points. Typically, you want to ride around 32,000 health in the content that you're doing. So if you're doing no CP Battleground, I would look for 30 to 32,000 health, and then your death dealers after a minute right around 35k health. Mundus Stone, I go with the Atronach. This is going to increase my recovery, which I definitely need, even especially doing Battlegrounds with no CP. Racial choices. The Dark Elf remains my favorite overall because you're going to get max magic and max stamina, along with flame resistance and spell damage. This is especially useful if you're going to play a vampire. The one unique one you could go with is a Nord. That's what I use for my stamina character, and it's not necessarily applicable for magic, but it gives you ultimate generation, making you extremely tanky, and especially if you want to rely on corrosive armor. Consumables, I go with the Gold Clockwork Citrus Fillet, increasing my health, my recovery, max magic, and magic recovery, along with tripods. So running those tripods on cooldown every 45 seconds, or when you need a big burst heal, is going to increase your recovery across the board. Well, gang, that's a build. Kind of went into a lot of detail here with some flexible options that you can put in and out. This is kind of like the meta staple build. I just played a little bit different with the sword and shield, so hopefully you got something out of this video. If you do, don't forget to hit that like, hit that subscribe. Come watch me on twitch.tv/Deltiasgaming as well, because I do play these builds live so you can see them in action. And also shout out to my Patreons for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to be featured in future end credits, link in the description below. Thanks for watching.